Okay, so let's go ahead and start. I want to welcome everyone, both remotely as well as in person, to our second in-person seminar. And today, we have the honor of Alvin Viray, who actually has a doctor of law. The doctor of law speak to us. But Alvin is sort of all things startups, IP, licensing. He's kind of a one-stop guy who knows about it all. He reviews patents. He negotiates with companies to license IP. He knows a lot about filing patents. So anything related to startups, patents, IP, Alvin is our guy here at UCI. So let's welcome.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate that. As Tom mentioned, my name is Alvin. I hail from the Research Translation Group, which is one of the groups in BL Applied Innovation. BL Applied Innovation has got sort of four focus areas, four groups, if you will. That's my group, which is, we call the Research Translation Group. We handle the technology transfer on campus. Okay, so we take the patents and the software, and we try to commercialize those. We have the Enterprise Collaboration Group. What they do is they go out and try to establish relationships with existing companies, maybe companies that want to sponsor research or have some other type of collaboration with our faculty. They try to make those connections. We have the New Ventures Group, which handles a lot of the services and resources for our startups, many of which I'll be talking about today. And of course, we have our industry-sponsored research. So if you are faculty and you are collaborating with a company and they want to sponsor research in your lab, that's one of the groups at BL Applied Innovation. We're going to talk about our group, Research Translation Group. As I mentioned earlier, we are tasked with receiving the inventions and software from the campus. If it's an invention that it can be patented, then we'll patent it. If it's software, we can copyright it. So we'll register the copyrights. We market that intellectual property to existing companies and to startup companies. So we'll license it to them in exchange for royalties back to the university. Okay, that whole process is called technology transfer. I have lots of slides that talk about that in a moment. So we support basically the campus community. So whether you are a faculty or a grad students are considered employees, or physicians or nurses or technicians on campus. You are able to come and talk to us and take advantage of the services and resources that I'm about to describe. So this is the technology transfer process here at UCI. It's actually very similar to most universities. Perhaps the difference would be the percentages that we give to the inventors at the end. So if I could run through this quickly, I'm looking at the audience. I see a couple of familiar faces. I know that some of you are already familiar with this process, but during the course of your research, your activity here on campus, if you develop or have an idea for a technology that might be both patentable and commercially valuable, we ask that you submit that to us via a form called the Record of Invention. Okay, this ROI is located online. It's a Word document. You just download it and they'll ask you specific questions about your technology. And then we'll ask that you submit it to us. Again, our group is called the Research Translation Group. Okay. Once we get it, it'll be assigned to one of our licensing officers. When I was hired about 18 years ago, my first order of business was to come to the Beckman Laser Institute and to check out all of the inventions that you guys have. Most of those came to me in my portfolio. So I worked with many of you over the years. We've spun out many companies over the years together. Since then, BLI has submitted many, many inventions. And so some of my colleagues at the office also has inventions that come from BLI. So when it's assigned to a licensing officer, he or she will take a look at it. Okay, she'll make sure that it's both patentable, because there are lots of requirements in order to get a patent in the US. So they'll look at all of those requirements to see that they've been fulfilled. They'll also take a look at the commercial value of the technology that you submit. If everything's green lighted, then we'll send it off for patenting. We outsource all our patenting to law firms in and around Southern California. If you name the patent attorney, we probably know them. This is at no cost to you. Okay, the university pays for the patenting. During any time from when we receive the record of invention to when it's patent pending or even granted, we'll try to find a home for it. Okay, so we will market the technology and share it with existing companies. Maybe it's a product or service that will enhance their business plan. So we'll seek to get an audience from them to take a look at it. Or sometimes the faculty, the inventor, him or herself, want to start a company based upon the technology that they developed here on campus. And we'll help them do that as well. Our license agreements have diligence requirements or diligence items. If it's a medical device, then for example, they have to complete animal trials within a certain period of time. They have to complete human clinical trials within a certain period of time. They have to get through FDA approval within a certain period of time, and then actually start selling it. The reason why we have those diligence requirements is because we want to make sure that the licensee is moving forward with the technology. Okay, if they have an issue or problems meeting that timeline, they could come back to us and we'll be more than happy to amend the license. Okay. Ideally, that licensee, that company will sponsor research back into the inventor's lab so that the inventor can develop improvement inventions or iterations of the invention, which they will submit to our office, which we will patent and then license back to the company. Okay. If it's a small company, a startup, perhaps that sponsorship will be in the form of an SBIR grant or an STTR grant. When it's licensed, we ask that the licensee pay for the patent costs. Okay, so I told you the inventors do not have to pay for the patent costs, the university does. This is true until it's been licensed. Once it's licensed, we ask the licensee to reimburse us for those costs. Okay, we also ask for a few other financials, royalties, for example. We'll ask them. So for every widget that they sell, if, for example, the royalty that we negotiate is 5%, they sell one widget for $100, then they have to give us $5 off each of those widgets. Okay, there might be an upfront fee as well to grant the license or execute the license with that company. And if it's a small startup, we could accept equity. Okay, so it's up to the company. If they want to offer equity, they may. If they offer equity, then some of the other numbers come down, right? So if they offer us more equity, then the royalties, that percentage will come down. If they offer no equity, then we would expect that that royalty to be closer to an industry standard royalty. Okay. So our inventors are always asking, Alvin, what's in it for us? Well, what do we get from the commercialization of our technologies here at UCI? Show me the money, Alvin. And I'm about to. 50% goes to the general campus. Okay, that goes to the provost and the chancellor. They do whatever they want with that money. 15% will come here to the Beckman Laser Institute. So when you submit your form, your ROI, it will ask you from what department do you hail? Okay, if it's BLI, you should put BLI. Okay, if you do that, then once it's commercialized, 15% of whatever we receive will come to Tom, and Tom will have to spend that here. Maybe you guys will have a big party, or maybe he will use that and send it back to the lab, right? 35% goes to the inventors, okay? So if we get equity in the company, you as the inventor own 35% of the equity. I told you that if we negotiate a royalty with that company of 5%, and they sell it for $100, they give us $5. We take 35% of that $5 and we give it back to the inventors. Okay, that's actually a personal check. You do whatever you want with that money. It always follows you for the lifetime of the license. So if you leave UCI, you just tell us where you want us to send you the check. Okay, if you pass away, we will give it to your state.
But it's not recording me though, right? No. Okay, good.
So most universities are very similar, with the exception of these numbers. I'll tell you right now, that's Stanford, USC, they're about 1/3. I've heard of some universities giving as high as 50%. If you were lucky enough to be hired at UC before, I think it was 1997, you get 50%. After 1997, they changed it to that 50. They split it 35% to the department, 15% to the 15% to the inventor, to the department, 35% to the inventors. Right? But pre-97, if you were hired, you actually get 50%. Right? That's how our office makes sure that your ideas are turned into products and services for the benefit of the public. So let's talk about some of the top UC inventions, not just UCI. One of them hails here from the Beckman Laser Institute. You know who the inventors are of the dynamic cooling device. You probably see them roaming the halls on a daily basis. The DCD, as you know, is a procedure to treat port wine stains. At one point in its history, it was in the top 3 of UC-wide inventions in terms of a revenue producing intellectual property. To this day, it is still the highest grossing IP that UCI has had. We licensed that to a company called Candela. So that was an existing company that we licensed that technology to. Out of UCI, our biggest revenue producer today, because that license with Candela has since expired. Okay, and it's because the patent expired naturally after 20 years. So the license expires along with the patent. So we no longer get royalties from the DCD. Today, our biggest revenue producers is a company called Glaukos. The technology is called an iStent. It is a little stent that you place in the eye to treat glaucoma. That company is called Glaukos. They were a startup out of ophthalmology. They went public. So now you could buy stock in that company. They're currently our biggest revenue producer here at UCI. Another one that is interesting, there's been a lot of news lately about vaccines, especially for COVID. Well, the hepatitis B vaccine, if you are a vaccinator, then your child or you probably got the hepatitis B vaccine that comes from UC San Francisco. On the other end of the spectrum in ag, UC Riverside produces the Tango Mandarin oranges. Okay, they give those trees to 2 sets of farmers. Those farmers grow those trees and they sell those Tango Mandarin oranges. You know them, if it's from one farmer, you know them as halos. If it's from another farmer, you know them as cuties. Okay, that is a genetically modified organism. A GMO plant comes from UC Riverside. Right. One of our latest acquisitions is a startup, Laser Associated Sciences, that hails from here, from the Beckman Laser Institute. Graduate students, Tyler, Sean, and Bruce, when they graduated, they licensed technology that they developed here into a company called LAS, and they were acquired by Medtronic. So they're currently working at Medtronic, very proud of how far they've come. I remember when they came to me 6, 7 years ago, these graduate students, they knew nothing about anything. They knew a lot about their technology, but startups and patenting and investments for their startup, FDA approval, they didn't know anything about that. But now they probably know more about that than I do. Okay, so very proud of where they've come from, and they came here from BLI. Okay. So I'm going to pause for a moment while I look at my other slides. So if any of you have questions, feel free to let me know.
You have projects that sort of start with investment after, how do you manage?
Sure. So the question is, if you already have a project that you're working with an industrial collaborator partner with, how do you manage that IP? So if in the course of that project, IP is developed, who's going to own it, right? Your industry collaborator is going to want to own it fully. Of course, the university is going to want to own it fully too. So how do we manage that? If we have an agreement in place, like an industry sponsored agreement, that is going to control. Okay, normally if the template language is in that agreement that was not changed, what it says is that ownership will be determined by inventorship. So if UCI, if we have a faculty member or PI who's named an inventor, that inventor is going to assign it to UC. If there is a company person who's named as an inventor on it, he or she will assign it to the company. In that case, it's going to be jointly owned. Okay, so it'll be jointly owned by the university and the company. By law, what that means is that the university could do whatever we want with the IP and not be accountable to the company. And the reverse is also true. So the company can do whatever they want with the IP and not be accountable to the university. Okay, the way we usually work that out is they're going to want the rights. They're going to want the university rights. So we will license our rights to them. Now they hold not only their rights, but also the university rights, which effectively gives them an exclusive license to the IP. Okay. The best thing to do is, if you do have an industry collaborator that you're working with and you haven't yet talked about the IP, please reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to sit down with you and to them, and we could talk about the various scenarios that they see with the IP. But I could also take a look at the language in their agreement to sort of explain to them what they've already signed. And if they haven't signed one yet, but you're thinking of doing so, then I could sit down and talk to them about their options for the language in that agreement. Okay. Okay.
Can I follow up with a question on that?
Yes.
So I came from a different university before from you say. I know some chemical exposure there. So if I want to license the, if you say I want to license the patent to
with IP that way, sure. Yeah, so the question was that I came from a different university or different entity where I had filed patents there. I'm continuing on that work now here at UCI. So I may develop IP here at UCI as well. How do we handle that if, for example, I want to do a startup and the startup is interested in both the IP from the previous university and the IP from UCI? Well, the startup is not going to want to have to license two pieces of IP, right? The startup, the way, if you're going to brute force it, the way it works is that the startup has to get a license from the previous university and also get a license from UCI. Now you have two license agreements. But what we've done in the past is we've talked to the previous university. So wherever it is that you're from, we'll ask them if they would be interested in bundling the IP, giving UC the right to license their IP in a bundle along with ours to this one startup. So in that case, if the previous university agrees, that agreement is called an interinstitutional agreement or an IAA. The IAA will give UCI the right to license their IP along with ours to the startup. That way, the startup only has to do one agreement with one of the entities, UCI, but they get both parties' IP. So we've done that in the past. That only works if the other university wants to play. Okay, if they're like, no, we want to license it to them ourselves directly, then there's really nothing that we could do to force them to do that. But we'll reach out to them if that is an issue, and we'll see if we can get it easiest way forward for your startup.
Hi, Alvin. Just a quick question. So
Sure.
if we're an affiliate member of the BLI and our primary appointment is with another department, where do the royalties for the patent, the 15%, where would it go? Would it go to BLI or would it go to the primary department?
Yeah. So the question is, if I'm a dual appointee at BLI and another department, Department of Medicine, Department of Ophthalmology, Department of Physics, where does the 15% departmental share go? Does it go to BLI or does it go to that other department? Whichever department you name in the RY is where it's going to go. Unfortunately, the UC system is not set up to split that 15%. And there's only one line in the RY that says one department. If you actually put two departments on there, we're going to ask you to choose one of them, which is unfortunate because I know that today a lot of our faculty are working in both places. So the answer to your question is the department that you list in your RY is where the first where the 15% is going to go. If you list two departments, we're going to ask you to pick one. Okay. If, I could see where the department chairs kind of want to get together and say, hey, it's fair that we split this. And so that's between the chairs. What the university is going to do, what UCOP is going to do is they're going to issue the check to one department, and then that chair has to work with the other department to split it if they want. But that's how it works now.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So BL Applied Innovation, the rest of my slides is going to talk about sort of entrepreneurship and also startups. BL Applied Innovation is trying to develop this startup ecosystem here in Orange County. So if you come to our space, which is called our physical space, our physical building is called the Cove. So if you come to the Cove, what I'm about to describe to you now are the services and resources that we have at the Cove, particularly for startups. Okay. One thing, so before I get into that, I do want to talk about POP grants. So BL Applied Innovation does give out what's called proof of product grants to our faculty. These are up to $100,000. I think many of you are familiar with it already. We had just finished a cohort of awardees. They're every 6 months. These are for faculty. In order for you to apply, you have to have already submitted a record of invention to our office, or at least contemporaneously with your proposal for the POP grants. That invention cannot have already been licensed. Okay, if it's already licensed to a company, you're not eligible for a POP grant. The POP grant is up to $100,000, as I mentioned. You have to spend all of it within 6 months. The deliverables for the proposal, the project that you need to do should be finished within 6 months as well. Okay. Now, I think we're on the 5th or 6th cohort. Now, usually what happens is we get 1 or 2 PIs come to us and tell us that they haven't spent all the money, or they need a longer time frame than the 6 months, and we usually give them that extension. Okay, but the application will say that the money and the objectives, the deliverables should be done within 6 months. Okay, and this is not for basic research. Again, this is for a invention that you've already submitted to our office, and you need some funding to move it towards development of a product or a service to be offered. Okay. We have something for graduate students. Yes. So the reviewers are outside consultants. I call them consultants, but we don't hire them. They're outside people that have an expertise in the field of that particular grant proposal. So the way it works is we will ask, if you plan on submitting for the POP grant, we'll ask that you tell us in advance by giving us a letter of intent. It's just a simple 1-page email, really, that says, I plan on applying for the grant. This is the invention that I am pursuing as a project, and this is my licensing officer. And then there's about, I think, another 4 weeks, 6 weeks before the full proposal is due. And then with that information that we get from your letter of intent, we'll try to go out and find basically and volunteer out in the community who would be willing to score your proposal. The way it works is, I think there are about 3 or 4 people who look at each proposal, they score it, and then we add up all the scores, and then the top ones are the ones who actually get awarded the grants. You could apply as many times as you want. We've had some PIs apply, didn't get it. They applied again, didn't get it. But each time they improved their proposal, and then like on the 3rd time, they did receive the POP grants. Okay. We do have something for graduate students as well. It's a brand new program started just recently called the Graduate Innovation Fellowship. It's for grad students and postdocs. We give you a $5,000 stipend. You must have some sort of idea that you want to commercialize. Perhaps it's your thesis project. It could be something else. The curriculum is based on giving you guidance and mentorship to develop that idea into a commercial product or service. Okay. And just for completeness, we also have something for undergraduates. We give them $1,000 micro grants that they can use for developing their product or service. We have an incubator at the Cove. The incubator is free. Okay. In order to be in there, you just need to be a UC affiliated. So either you are pursuing UCI technology, or your current faculty, grad student, staff. You could apply to be in the incubator. It comes with workshops, networking events. We'll actually assign you a mentor to help you along so that if you need help with your business plan or if you need help with prototyping or getting it to the next step in the commercialization, there are people who will help you do that at BL Applied Innovation. Okay. Don't forget, BLI has a photonic incubator as well. So some of our startups will choose not to come to the Cove. Instead, they'll stay here at BLI's photonic incubator. LES was here before they were acquired by Medtronic. Modulum was here before they got enough money that they went out and got their own space, and et cetera, et cetera. Okay, nice thing about BLI, of course, is that if it's your own startup company, then the startup company can have a physical space here. Sometimes that startup company can actually use the same equipment that you're already using in your lab. You'd have to work that out with Tom and Aaron and Sari, okay, about how to get into the BLI Photonic Incubator and what are some of the arrangements that you need to do to be able to have your startup here. Okay. So we have innovation advisors also at BL Applied Innovation. These are volunteers. There was a question earlier about who reviews the POP grants. Some of those reviewers will come from the Innovation Advisors Network. This is basically a Rolodex of business leaders and subject matter experts. They want to give back to the community, right? So some of them are retired CEOs in software and medical device and pharma. Some of them are FDA consultants. Some of them are attorneys, corporate attorneys, patent attorneys, and they're there and they volunteer their time. Okay, I think Tom has reached out to me a little while ago, maybe last summer, for someone who is well versed in FDA regulatory. So Tom, I hooked Tom up with one of the innovation advisors. His name was Tom or Jim Gustafin. And I think from the feedback from Tom, that went very well. So these innovation advisors are just hanging out. They're just waiting for someone to come and seek some advice and some mentorship for them. So if you have any type of questions or want to talk to someone with some of experience in a particular field, you could always approach me and I'll go through our Rolodex to see if there's someone there that would be appropriate for you to sit down and chat with. Okay. And that's at no cost to you. We also have a program called iCorps. iCorps is funded by the National Science Foundation. iCorps is basically a class. Okay, it's done every quarter except the summers. The class used to be 4 weeks, 4 hours each week. They're changing it up a little bit. I think they're making it shorter. But what it is it's basically a customer discovery based curriculum. What that means is they're going to teach you how to go out and get customer feedback for your product or service. Basically, you need to go out and talk to people who are going to be using your technology or purchasing your technology, finding out if what you think they want it for is actually a problem that they have that you are solving. The premise is that by talking and listening to your customers, it'll help you understand what's important to them. And so there are about 5 or 6 teams in each cohort. And by talking through these issues in the class, that's how you're going to learn about customer discovery, because each team needs to go out, talk to their customers, and then present in class what it was that their customers have given them feedback, their and then sometimes they pivot, right? So if they have a particular service that they're offering or think that they want to offer, if they talk to their customers, they find out something is more important, they kind of pivot. The same is true for a product as well. Okay, so that's iCorps. That's free. You could apply. Usually it's oversubscribed. We usually get about 10, 11 teams applying. We only accept 5 or 6 at a time. Many of the folks who go through iCorps are in a better position to receive an SBIR or STTR grant. So those are grants by the federal government to startups. It's called the Small Business Innovation Research Grant. I think the phase 1 is up to $250,000. Phase 2 is about $750,000. We have also in our space is a organization called the Small Business Development Center, and they have SBR, STTR experts on there. So if you have a startup and you're like, I don't know if I could apply for a grant, is there a grant available? If there is, can someone help me with the proposal? The answer is yes. Let me know and I will hook you up with someone from the Small Business Development Center who rents us an office in our space. They are not unique to the Cove or even to Orange County. There's one in LA, there's one in San Diego, there's one in Inland Empire. You guys pay for their services through your taxes. They're funded by the federal government and the state. Okay, so they're available to you. When you're ready, when you have your business plan ready to go and you want to pitch it, you could come and let me know. Our investor network goes wide and far. These are about 5 investor groups that have offices at the Cove. Tecos Angels, the Cove Fund. So the Cove Fund got sort of started around the same time that Beal Applied Innovation did, and they rent an office at the Cove, and they call themselves the Cove Fund, but they're not managed by the university at all. Okay, so there are a group of very wealthy private individuals. They happen to call their fund the Cove Fund. They're on their 3rd round of investment now. The first one I think was 5 million. They were successful. The second one was 10 million. They were successful, and now I think they want to raise $30 million. They've invested in about 5 UCI startups. Okay, Octus Global, they are a VC. They look for medical device technologies. Hamamatsu Ventures used to be in our space. I haven't seen them in a long time. I don't know if they're still roaming around in our space. Okay, so they might be. It's very quiet at Applied Innovation at the Cove since COVID hit. But I know Hamamatsu was there. I know that BLI has had a good relationship with them in the past.
Which stage is the best to reach out to this?
Sure. So the difference between an angel group and a VC group is basically the stage at which the company is in. These angel groups, like the Tecos Angels and the Cove Fund, are early stage. So they'll want to come in after your friends and family. So if you have friends and family funding, or even if you don't, then you're looking for a professional private investment, you'd go to the Tecos Angels or the Cove Fund. The Cove Fund, I even think they even talked about being pre-seed, which is even money that you receive before an angel. The difference is the amount, right? So that angels typically invest less than $2 million. Like a pre-seed is like 500,000. Once you go to a VC, you're looking at 3 million or more money, $3 million or more. Okay. So in addition to those services, resources, you could also rent an office in our space. University lab partners, they actually rent half of our third story. So ULP is actually an incubator in and of themselves. So it's an incubator within the Cove. They have wet lab space. They have state-of-the-art equipment up there. It was one of the first wet lab spaces here in Orange County. They just opened up a second wet lab space over there in Stoka University. What is that? Where's that? In Laguna Niguel or Laguna Hills? So some of the, well, all of the companies that are in ULP, they need lab space, specifically wet lab space, right? So they rent space up there in our third floor. We have Next Biomedical. That's also an incubator. They have the use of ULP, and I believe they used to be here also at BLI. Okay, at the BLI photonic incubator. Pre-COVID, we used to have lots of networking events, lots of educational events. All of these things were free, right? We used to do Monday Night Football as a networking sort of social events. The way that would work is we would have a football game on the big screens and then a bunch of other little screens showing some sports events going on at the same time. During halftime, we'd have two startups give their pitch, their business plan pitch. We haven't had that since COVID. Pre-COVID also, we had educational seminars. We had Google Ventures come and talk about what they're looking for in their areas of interest, how to get in front of them to pitch your business plan. We've had the FDA come and talk about how to get a medical device through their regulatory approval. We've had patent attorneys talk about intellectual property and protecting it, IP 101. Okay, so let's see, I want to check the time. I think I have about 15 minutes. So one question I get all the time is kind of who owns my IP if I develop something. Generally speaking, the university is going to. Okay, this is because the university is looking at sort of four things. If the development of your intellectual property falls under just one of these, then the university is going to ask you to assign it to us. If it's under your scope of employment, right? So BLI pays you to do something. And if during the course of that activity, you come up with the invention, this is what we pay you to do, then we're going to ask that you assign it to us. If you use UC time and resources, so if you're on the clock while you're working, if you use the lab, or even if you have graduate students work on the project, right? We're going to ask that you assign that IP to us. If it's funded by UC, so if you're receiving a government federal grant or another nonprofit grant through the university to develop that and move forward with that project, then we're going to want to own it. Also, if it falls under an agreement, right? If we have a collaboration agreement with a company or some other third-party industry-sponsored research, and that technology comes from that, from the scope of that agreement, then we are going to want to own it as well. So this means that if you develop IP outside of this, that it's yours, right? So if I had a surgeon from the medical center, he's a gastroenterologist. He does research in that area, and he treats patients, sees and treats patients in that area. He came up with a home security system, okay? And he's like, I didn't use, this is not under my scope of employment, didn't use any UC time and resources to develop this home security system, wasn't funded, not under any type of agreement with UC. I would like it to be mine. And we agreed that UC has no interest, any rights, excuse me, in this invention, and we released it to him. Okay. So some of you will go out maybe and consult with a company because they recognize you as an expert in your field, want to hire you as a consultant to help them. You need to be sure that what you are doing for them is not under your scope of employment here, that you don't use usage, time, and resources here, so that you can assign any IP that you develop to them, which is what they're going to want you to do. Okay. And we have faculty that consult all the time. So, yes, Tom.
Question. Software and so I'm sure. But, comment on some differences software versus some the device.
Yeah, so the question was, how does the FDA regulatory handle software versus a device? And I do not know. We had a software come out of BLI, and it was for I'm drawing a blank on it. Yeah, what was it? Was it for hearing? We had a software come out of BLI. We had another software come out of BME. I think it was for hearing, actually. It was using your Bluetooth earpiece and your phone as sort of a hearing aid. And it was, the app was online, and it was advertised as being able to be used as a hearing aid. And then they got a letter from the FDA because they didn't go through any type of regulatory for that. It was pure software because you use your existing Bluetooth earpiece or whatever and your phone. You just use the app, and the way it works is the phone picks up ambient sounds and augments it, makes it louder, and transmits it to your ears. So they got a letter from the FDA saying you cannot advertise this as a hearing aid. So they changed it, and they said it's for entertainment purposes only, like for eavesdropping. And the FDA was fine with it. So I know that there is some regulatory for pure software, but I do not know much beyond that. But I could help you find the answer. We talk about it. Let's find someone who knows the answer. Yes.
There are a couple unions formed in the UC, especially the M researchers. Does that agreement change anything regarding patent?
So the question is the unions on campus. So if there's a employee, including faculty, staff, graduate students, who are all considered employees, join a union, will that affect their IP rights? And the answer is no. They generally, as a UCI employee, you signed our patent acknowledgement agreements, whether you remember that or not. HR will have a copy of it. What it says is that if you develop anything that's under your scope of employment, use UC time and resources funded by UC, or falls under agreement, that we ask that you assign that IP to us. And I imagine that the fact that you're in a union doesn't affect that. Yes.
How many percentage of patent disclosure eventually?
Yeah, how many inventions disclosures eventually turn into something that is licensed or makes money, or patent application. Okay. So we get on average about 130, 140 patent invention disclosures per year. UCSD does like 300, UCLA does like 500. Of the ones that we receive, we probably file a provisional patent application on half. About half of those will file provisional. And then of those provisionals that make it to non-provisional, maybe 3/4 of those will make it. So about 75% of the ones that we file provisionally will actually make it into a non-provisional.
How do you decide so they should be
Yeah, so how do we decide when we file, if we're going to decide, if we file a non-provisional from the provisional? So as you guys know, the provisional pretty much lasts for a year. We could file a provisional, it'll cost us a few $1,000s to do a provisional. It gets us a filing date, and then within a year we have to file the non-provisional. How do we decide that if we're going to file non-provisional? We work with the inventor. We work with the inventor to see, what his or her plans are for commercialization. If they're thinking of doing a startup, chances are greater that we'll file it. If they have a list of potential licensees, companies that we could reach out to that would be interested in licensing the technology, chances are better that we would file a non-provisional. Obviously, if you're already working with a company, then 90% of the time we'll file the non-provisional. What we do is the licensing officers will take a look at the invention, see if it is patentable. So we'll do like a prior art search. Prior art search means that we'll look at everything that has come before your invention that's related to your invention. And we'll share, typically, if we find something that is strong prior art, then we'll share that with our faculty and we'll say, hey, what do you think about this? And sometimes the faculty agrees that it's strong prior art, that what he has is probably not going to be patentable. And then we could abandon the case at that time.
One last question is that it's about startup. Better to have be nice.
So the question is, do you have to have the license in place already? Does your startup have to have rights to the IP already in order to apply for the SBIR, SCTR? It's crazy that the answer is no. So we've had companies who have applied and received SBIR funding and they have no rights to the IP. I don't know who's reviewing those grants, but one of the first questions should be, do you already have rights in the IP that you want to pursue for this grant? But the answer technically is no, you don't. You don't have to have rights in the IP. So we've had companies that will go out and get the SBIR, start moving forward with it. And the university is like, we could license this to anyone we want. We don't have to license it to you. But of course, if it's a faculty initiated startup, we will move forward to licensing it with the faculty's startup. But technically, that is whether or not the company has rights to the IP is not something that these federal agencies are looking at in order to give them the grant. It's crazy.
I want to follow up on that. So for the license, since let's say I start a company and also you say employee, who is going to negotiate the license? Because there might be conflict of interest.
Yeah. So in order to, so the question is, can I, as the faculty inventor, can I negotiate on behalf of my startup the license with UC? The answer is no. So in order to do a startup here, you're going to have to find a business partner who's going to take care of the signing of the agreements. As a faculty member, one thing that you're going to need to do is find a business partner because we will not negotiate directly with any of our employees. The business partner can be your investor. It could be an attorney that you hire. It could be someone, whoever is on the startup side that has signature authority that could sign on behalf of the company. We know that you guys are pulling the strings. We know that you're in the background. You're looking at all of the terms, but for appearance's sake, we're not supposed to be negotiating directly with you. You need to have someone else do it. We've had, so your spouse can't do it either. So it can't be the employee and it cannot be the employee's spouse, but I've done it with a brother-in-law. I've done it with their son. That was okay. Of course, if you hire an attorney, I'll work with your attorney. If you go out and find a business partner, your neighbor, I've done it with neighbors too, then as long as he or she has signature authority, I could negotiate the license with him or her.
When the startup should hire an attorney, because you at the beginning you don't have any funds, any money. What's the next?
Right. So at some point, you're probably going to want to get an attorney, but it depends on how savvy you think you are and whether or not you could find a business person to sign on your behalf. If you don't have anyone, then, and you want the license now, you're going to have to hire an attorney because that person will sign the agreement and will negotiate and sign the agreement on your behalf. But if you think that you can go to LegalZoom and incorporate the company yourself, you can do that. If you think that you can pass the negotiation and the signing of the agreement to someone that you know and trust who's not an attorney, you could do that. But I would say once you start to get professional investment, once you start taking money from other people, is probably when you're going to want to get an attorney on your side. Okay.
Actually, I have a question. This is Howard Lee.
Oh, I'm sorry, guys. I got two people talking to me. So these are the last. Let's do last two questions because it looks like we're 1 o'clock now. I'll take the one over Zoom first, and then you. Okay, go ahead.
Hey, Alvin, this is Howard Lee. Thank you for all the information. So I actually want to know more about the POP grant. So is that, do we need to have a startup company at that time, and also what kind of status like on the invention we have to apply those POP grants?
So the question was about a POP grant. Do I need to have a company? The answer is no, you do not. In fact, you're not supposed to. It's supposed to be, it's not supposed to be licensed. So if you have a company, just make sure that the startup company hasn't licensed the IP yet, and then you'll be eligible for the POP grants. You just need to have submitted an ROI to our office. If you submitted an ROI and it is not already licensed, then you are eligible for the POP grant.
Okay, thank you. Maybe one additional, like, do we have more like networking event in the COPE students? I think it's a little bit quiet at the moment. So.
It is. So we do. The question was, do we have any more networking events? It's quiet. The plan is to have more in the future and to bring it back to where it was pre-COVID. Pre-COVID, we had like 2-3 events a week. That place was jumping. And these are all free events, right? Some of them serve food and drinks. But my personal observation is there's nothing going on. You could sign up online to be on their the sign up sheet. They'll send you all the events. I'm on there, and we haven't had too many. It's pretty quiet.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. One last question.
Yeah, but how you decide to convert the disclosure to a patent application? Or who decide that?
Yeah. So who decides moving when we receive an ROI? How do we know whether or not we're going to file a provisional or a non-provisional? So the licensing officer will be assigned to the invention. The licensing officer will work with the inventor to see and to talk about, for example, the prior art, and to talk about what's the vision and plan for commercialization. And through that process, they will decide whether or not it's something that they want to pursue. As I mentioned, if it gets to the provisional stage, then we have a year to decide whether or not we're going to file a non-provisional. Yeah, so it's on a case-by-case basis, depending on each particular technology.
Sorry, I have one more question.
Okay.
So let's say if I apply a disclosure patent at the previous university, it's just provisional, never turn to the and are they own rights? Yeah.
So the question was, if I filed a provisional at my previous university before coming to UCI, do they, and right now it's still only at the provisional stage, do they still own it? The answer is yes, that they still own it. In fact, even if you submit an invention disclosure to them before you left, even if they haven't filed it yet, it's going to be owned by them. Anything that you develop here, though, any iterations, improvements to that technology will be owned by UCI. Okay, you guys, I'm going to let you go. We're 6 minutes past the hour. Thank you so much.